Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change everything. Sometimes a stranger's gentle heart can heal what a mother's love alone cannot reach. In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, 68-year-old Eli Fisher lived quietly on his small farm. The widowed Amish man spent his days caring for horses, finding peace in their gentle nature. He had no children of his own, but he understood the healing power of these noble animals. On this autumn morning, a distressed little girl wandered onto his property. 7-year-old Lily was overwhelmed and scared, her autism making the world feel too loud and chaotic. Without hesitation, Eli lifted her onto his calmest mare, watching as the horse's steady rhythm began to soothe her. What he didn't know was that someone was watching from behind the fence, someone who had been searching for exactly this kind of connection. But could this simple moment of compassion change 3 lives forever? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning mist clung to the Pennsylvania hills like a gentle prayer, rising from the valleys where generations of Amish families had worked the same rich soil. Eli Fisher stood at his kitchen window, watching the sun paint the maple trees in shades of amber and gold, his calloused hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee, black, no sugar, the way Sarah used to make it before the cancer took her voice. Then her breath. 3 years ago, the half-finished wedding quilt still lay, folded in the cedar chest upstairs, its intricate pattern of interlocking rings, a testament to love interrupted. Sarah had started it the week before her diagnosis, her nimble fingers working the needle with the same precision she'd brought to 42 years of marriage. Now it remained untouched, too precious to complete, too painful to put away. Eli pulled on his worn leather boots and stepped onto the porch. The familiar sounds of morning surrounded him, the gentle lowing of cattle in the distance, the rhythmic clip-clop of horse hooves on the gravel road as his neighbor Jacob headed to the fields. The Amish community of Willow Creek had been his anchor through the darkest months after Sarah's passing, their quiet presence more healing than any words could have been. His workshop stood behind the house, a weathered barn where he practiced. The trade passed down from his father and grandfather before him. As the community's farrier, Eli understood horses in ways that city folk never could. He could read their moods in the tilt of an ear, sense their pain in the way they favored a leg, feel their trust in the way they lowered their heads when he approached. Today, like every day for the past 40 years, he would tend to the animals that needed his care. Mrs. Yoda's draft horse had thrown a shoe yesterday. The Stoltzfus family's mare was due for her regular trimming. Simple work, honest work, the kind that left a man's hands dirty but his conscience clean. The irony wasn't lost on him that he'd spent a lifetime healing horses while being unable to heal the one person who mattered most. Sarah had accepted her illness with the same grace she'd brought to everything else, never complaining during the treatments that left her weak and hollow-eyed. She'd squeezed his hand on that final morning and whispered, "Find joy again, Eli. Promise me you'll find joy." He'd made the promise, though he had no idea how to keep it. 300 miles northeast, in a Manhattan penthouse that cost more per month than most people earned in a year, Victoria Langford stood at her own window, looking down at the ant-like traffic 40 floors below. The city never slept, and lately neither did she. The digital clock on her desk glowed 5:47 a.m., but she'd been awake since 3, her mind churning through quarterly projections, merger possibilities, and the hostile takeover attempt that threatened. Everything she'd built, Langford Technologies, had been her baby, born from a dorm room idea at MIT and nurtured through 20-hour days and a marriage that couldn't survive her ambition. David had wanted children, a white picket fence, family, dinners without laptops and conference calls. He'd gotten divorce papers instead, though he'd stayed long enough to help create Lily, the one pure thing to emerge from their fractured relationship. Victoria turned from the window and walked quietly down the hallway to her daughter's room. Lily slept curled in a tight ball, her dark hair spread across the pillow like spilled ink. Even in sleep she looked guarded, as if the world might overwhelm her at any moment. 7 years old, and Lily had spoken fewer than 100 words in her entire life. The specialists had a name for it: autism spectrum disorder with selective mutism, but labels didn't make the silence any easier to bear. Victoria had tried everything: the best therapists money could buy, specialized schools, sensory integration programs, medications that made Lily drowsy and disconnected. Nothing worked. The irony was that Victoria could command a boardroom full of executives, negotiate billion-dollar deals, and predict market trends with uncanny accuracy. But she couldn't connect with her own daughter. Lily would sit for hours arranging her toys in precise patterns, humming wordlessly to herself, living in a world that seemed both more complex and more peaceful than the chaos Victoria inhabited. The nanny, Mrs. Chen, handled most of Lily's daily care. School pickup, meals, bedtime routines, all the things a mother should do but Victoria rarely had time for. Another failure to add to her growing list, though she told herself that providing financial security was its own form of love. Her phone buzzed with the first of what would be dozens of messages before breakfast. Tokyo markets, overnight developments, crisis management for a company that never stopped moving. She glanced once more at Lily's sleeping form and closed the door softly. By 7 a.m., Victoria was dressed in her armor, a charcoal grey Armani suit that cost more than most people's cars, heels that added 3 inches to her already imposing height, and the expression of controlled confidence that had intimidated competitors and inspired employees for 15 years. The breakfast meeting was at the Four Seasons. Merger talks with a German tech firm that could expand her company's reach into European markets. She'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, studying their financial records, understanding their corporate culture, anticipating every possible objection. But as she sat across from Herr Müller and his team of advisors, Victoria found her mind drifting. Lily had cried during their brief goodbye, not the screaming meltdown that used to terrify Victoria, but quiet tears that somehow hurt worse. Mrs. Chen had assured her it was normal separation anxiety, but Victoria wondered if her daughter was beginning to understand that work always came first. "Mrs. Langford," Herr Müller's voice cut through her distraction, "you seem concerned about our proposal." Victoria straightened, forcing her attention back to the documents spread across the table. "I'm simply considering all the implications. This partnership would require significant changes to our corporate structure." The conversation continued for 2 hours, but Victoria's heart wasn't in it. She found herself agreeing to terms she would normally have fought, accepting conditions that felt too generous to their potential partners. When Herr Müller finally shook her hand and declared the preliminary agreement satisfactory, Victoria felt none of the triumph she'd expected. Her assistant, Marcus, was waiting in the lobby with her schedule for the rest of the day. 3 more meetings, a conference call with investors, and a company dinner that would keep her out until midnight. Another day of success that felt increasingly hollow. "Cancel everything after 2 o'clock, she said suddenly. Marcus looked startled. "Ma'am, the Yamamoto presentation is at 4, and the dinner with—" "Cancel it all." Victoria was already walking toward the exit. "I'm taking Lily somewhere." She wasn't sure what impulse drove her to the travel agent's office instead of back to the penthouse. Victoria had assistants who handled such things, travel coordinators who could arrange private jets to any destination within hours. But she found herself sitting across from a middle-aged woman named Carol, who specialized in family-friendly getaways. "I need somewhere quiet," Victoria heard herself saying. "Somewhere my daughter can just be a child." Carol's eyes lit up with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loved her work. "How old is your daughter?" 7. She needs places that aren't too stimulating, too loud. I have just the thing." Carol turned her computer screen toward Victoria, Pennsylvania Dutch country, rolling hills, farms, bed and breakfasts, very peaceful. There's a wonderful cottage near Lancaster County that's perfect for families looking to slow down. Victoria stared at the photos of green fields and red barns, horse-drawn buggies and children playing in meadows. It looked like something from another century, a world untouched by the digital chaos that defined her life. "Book it," she said, "for 2 weeks. Wonderful. You'll love the countryside cottage. It's right next to some working farms, so your daughter might enjoy seeing the animals. Very safe area, and the owners are lovely people." As Victoria walked back to her car, she wondered what she'd just done. 2 weeks away from the company during the most critical negotiations of the year seemed like professional suicide. But for the first time in months, she felt something that might have been hope. That evening, as she tucked Lily into bed, Victoria tried to explain their upcoming trip. "We're going to the countryside, sweetheart. Green fields and horses and quiet places to play." Lily didn't respond verbally, but something in her dark eyes seemed to brighten. She pointed to one of her books, a picture book about farm animals that she'd read dozens of times. "Yes," Victoria said softly, "just like in your book." She kissed Lily's forehead and turned off the light, not knowing that in 3 days, her daughter would find the very connection she'd been searching for in the gentle hands of a man who understood that healing came not from words, but from presence. The wedding quilt remained folded in its cedar chest, waiting for the right moment to be completed, and in her penthouse bedroom, Victoria fell asleep planning an escape from a life that felt increasingly like a beautiful prison. The leather-bound journal had been Victoria's idea, another attempt to document Lily's behavior patterns, hoping to find some key that would unlock her daughter's silence. Page after page contained careful observations. Tuesday, 3:47 p.m., Lily. Arranged blocks by color for 23 minutes, no verbal response to questions. Friday, 8:12 a.m., covered ears during garbage truck, rocked for 12 minutes. Victoria had titled it Lily's Silence Journal, though she'd never shared the name with anyone, not even Dr. Morrison, Lily's primary therapist. It felt too revealing, too much like admitting defeat. Now, sitting in the countryside cottage with morning light streaming through unfamiliar windows, Victoria opened the journal to a fresh page. Day 1 in Pennsylvania. New environment may trigger either curiosity or anxiety. Monitor for... Her phone buzzed insistently. Marcus, probably, with the crisis du jour that couldn't wait for her return. She'd turned off most notifications, but emergencies still found their way through. The caller ID showed her business partner, Richard Steinberg. "Victoria, thank God. Where are you? The Yamamoto deal is falling apart. They're threatening to walk if we don't handle it, Richard. That's why I pay you an obscene salary. But you're the face of this company. They want guarantees that only you can..." Victoria glanced toward the small bedroom where Lily was still sleeping, exhausted from yesterday's travel. "I'm taking care of something more important." More important than a $2 billion acquisition? The question hung in the air, highlighting everything wrong with her priorities. Before she could answer, the call connected to her laptop for a video conference, another emergency meeting she couldn't avoid. As executives from 3 continents filled her screen, Victoria tried to focus on quarterly projections and market volatility. But her attention kept drifting to the window where rolling green hills stretched toward a horizon unmarked by skyscrapers or digital billboards. "Victoria?" Her CFO's voice was sharp. "Did you hear the question about the European expansion timeline?" "Of course. I think we should..." A crash from the bedroom interrupted her thought. "Excuse me for just a moment." Lily stood in the doorway, her small suitcase overturned and clothes scattered across the floor. Her eyes were wide with the particular kind of panic that Victoria had learned to recognize. Too many new sounds, too many unfamiliar smells, too much change all at once. "It's okay, sweetheart," Victoria said, though her voice carried the tension of 15 executives waiting on screen. "We're just in a new place for a little while." Lily's breathing became rapid and shallow. She covered her ears and began the rocking motion that usually preceded a complete meltdown. Victoria's heart sank as she recognized the signs. "I need to call you back," she said to the screen. "Victoria, this can't wait. The Tokyo market's open in 3 hours, and I said I'll call back." She closed the laptop more firmly than necessary, but it was too late. Lily was already moving toward the cottage door, her small fingers fumbling with the lock. Victoria had seen this before, the desperate need to escape when the world became too overwhelming. Usually, Mrs. Chen would handle it with practice, calm, creating a quiet space until the storm passed. Now Victoria was alone with her daughter's distress, and she had no idea what to do. "Lily, wait!" But the door was already open, and Lily was running across the unfamiliar yard in her pajamas and bare feet. Victoria grabbed her shoes and followed, her heart pounding as she watched her daughter disappear into a stand of maple trees that bordered the property. The cottage was more isolated than she'd realized. No neighbors visible, no fences to contain a frightened child. "Lily!" Her voice carried across the morning air, but there was no response. Victoria's designer. Flats were completely unsuited for cross-country running. She stumbled over roots and rocks, her business attire catching on branches as she pushed through the underbrush. The silence was absolute except for her own labored breathing and the distant sound of water. A creek, maybe, which added another layer to her growing panic. She emerged from the trees into a pasture where several horses grazed peacefully near a weathered barn. The animals looked up at her approach, but didn't seem alarmed. In the distance she could see a farmhouse with smoke rising from the chimney, and closer, a small figure huddled against the barn wall. Lily sat curled in a tight ball, her arms wrapped around her knees, rocking slightly. Victoria approached carefully, remembering Dr. Morrison's advice about not overwhelming her during these episodes. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here." But before she could reach Lily, a man emerged from the barn, tall and lean with graying hair beneath. A simple straw hat, he moved with the unhurried pace of someone accustomed to working with nervous animals. His clothes were plain but well-maintained, dark pants, a light blue shirt, suspenders that spoke of a life lived without pretense. Victoria's protective instincts flared. "Stay back, please. She's frightened." The man paused, his intelligent brown eyes taking in the scene with quiet assessment. When he spoke, his voice was low and measured, carrying the faint accent she'd heard in documentaries about Amish communities. "The little one found her way to safety," he said simply. "Animals know when someone needs shelter." As if to prove his point, a gentle chestnut mare had wandered close to Lily, lowering her massive head to sniff curiously at the small girl. Instead of recoiling, Lily looked up with wonder, her rocking gradually slowing. "Lily, come away from there," Victoria said, her city-bred caution making her wary of the large animal. "She's in no danger," the man said quietly. "Buttercup is the gentlest soul God ever put on 4 legs. Raised her from a foal myself." He approached slowly, speaking in what Victoria realized was Pennsylvania Dutch, soft musical words that seemed to calm both child and horse. Lily's breathing had normalized, and she was actually reaching out tentatively toward the mare's velvet nose. Without asking permission, the man knelt beside Lily and continued his quiet conversation. Victoria couldn't understand the words, but the tone was universally soothing, the voice someone might use to comfort a frightened animal or a grieving friend. Then, to Victoria's amazement, Lily responded, not with words, but with a small sound of contentment that Victoria hadn't heard in months. "She likes horses," the man observed in English, glancing up at Victoria with eyes that held decades of quiet wisdom. "She's never been around them before. I don't think it's safe. Would you trust me for a moment?" There was something in his voice that made Victoria pause. "I've been working with horses for 40 years, and sometimes they understand what words cannot say." Before Victoria could object, he gently lifted Lily, who should have panicked at being touched by a stranger, and set her on Buttercup's broad back. His hands remained steady on either side of her small form, and the horse stood perfectly still, as if she understood the precious nature of her cargo. Lily's transformation was immediate and complete. The tension left her small body, and for the first time in memory, she looked truly peaceful. Her hands found the horse's mane, and she leaned forward slightly, as if listening to some conversation only she could hear. Victoria felt tears she hadn't expected. This stranger had accomplished in 5 minutes what teams of specialists had failed to achieve in years. He'd given her daughter a moment of pure calm. "I'm Eli Fisher," the man said, his attention never leaving Lily. "And I believe this young lady has found exactly what she was looking for, Victoria Langford, and that's Lily." She paused, watching her daughter's face glow with something approaching joy. "How did you know what to do?" "I didn't know anything," Eli replied. "But Buttercup did. Horses have a gift for reading hearts. They see past the fear to what's underneath." If understanding she was being discussed, Buttercup began a gentle walk around the small paddock, her movements so smooth that Lily barely swayed. The little girl's eyes were bright and alert, taking in every detail of her elevated view of the world. "She's never this calm with strangers," Victoria whispered. "Perhaps she doesn't see me as a stranger," Eli suggested. "Children and animals, they recognize kindness without needing credentials." When Buttercup completed her circuit and returned to the starting point, Eli lifted Lily down with the same careful gentleness. The little girl looked up at him with what could only be described as adoration, then turned to her mother with an expression Victoria had never seen before. "Horse," Lily said clearly. "Nice horse." Victoria's breath caught. Not just words, but a complete thought, spoken with confidence and joy. She looked at Eli with something approaching awe. "How long are you staying in our valley?" he asked. 2 weeks, Victoria managed, still shaken by hearing her daughter's voice. "Well then," Eli said, guiding Buttercup back toward the barn. "I suspect we'll be seeing more of each other." As they walked back toward the cottage, Lily chattering softly about the nice horse and kind man, Victoria realized that her carefully planned digital detox had just become something much more significant. Her phone was buzzing again. 17 missed calls, 43 unread messages, a company crisis that demanded her immediate attention. But for the first time in 7 years, none of that seemed to matter as much as the sound of her daughter's voice, finally freed from its long silence. Victoria's business phone had become a weight in her pocket, a sleek titanium anchor that seemed to grow heavier with each ignored call. She'd set it to silent after the 5th emergency conference request before noon, but the vibrations still pulsed against her leg like an accusatory heartbeat. She sat on the cottage's small porch, watching Lily play quietly in the yard with a collection of smooth stones she'd gathered from the creek. The child had arranged them in precise rows, by size and color, humming the same wordless melody that had filled their apartment for years. But something was different now. Every few minutes, Lily would glance toward the property line where Eli's farm began, as if hoping to catch sight of the horses grazing in the distant pasture. "Horse," Lily had said again at breakfast, the word clear and intentional. Then, pointing toward the barn they could barely see through the trees, "Nice man." 3 full sentences in 24 hours. Dr. Morrison would want to document everything, analyze the environmental factors, schedule additional sessions to replicate the breakthrough. Victoria had already composed the email twice in her head, before realizing she didn't want to dissect the magic of yesterday morning. Her laptop chimed with an incoming video call. Marcus, no doubt, with another crisis that couldn't wait. Victoria let it ring through to voicemail, then immediately felt guilty. 15 employees in the New York office were probably scrambling to handle decisions that she normally made without thinking. She opened her browser and searched equine therapy autism, feeling foolish for not knowing such a thing existed. Page after page of research studies, treatment centers, success stories that echoed what she'd witnessed yesterday. Children who'd been non-verbal for years, suddenly communicating through their connection with horses. Programs that cost thousands of dollars to achieve what Eli had accomplished with simple kindness. Why hadn't any of Lily's specialists mentioned this option? She'd paid for the best therapists, the most cutting-edge treatments, experimental programs that promised breakthrough results, but none of them had suggested that healing might come from something as elemental as a child and a horse learning to trust each other. The sound of hoofbeats on gravel made her look up. Eli was riding a sturdy bay, gelding down the lane that separated their properties, moving with the easy grace of someone who'd been in the saddle since childhood. He touched the brim of his hat in greeting as he passed, and Lily immediately abandoned her stone arrangement to run to the fence. "Horse," she called, waving with genuine enthusiasm. Eli brought his mount to a gentle stop and dismounted with fluid motion. "Good morning, Lily. This is Thunder. He's not as gentle as Buttercup, but he's a good listener." Victoria approached more cautiously, still processing the sight of her daughter actively seeking interaction with another person. At home, Lily typically hid behind Victoria or Mrs. Chen when strangers were around. "I hope we're not disturbing." "Your work?" Victoria said. "Work finds its own rhythm on a farm," Eli replied. "Some things can't be rushed." His eyes held the patience of someone who'd learned to read seasons and weather, to trust in natural timing rather than imposed schedules. Thunder lowered his head toward Lily, who reached up fearlessly to stroke his nose. The horse's eyes half closed with contentment, and Lily made a soft sound that might have been laughter. "She's different here," Victoria observed, more to herself than to Eli. "Children respond to authenticity," he said simply. "Animals don't. Pretend to be something they're not, so children don't feel the need to perform for them." The words stung with unexpected accuracy. How often had Victoria felt like she was performing? The successful CEO, the competent mother, the woman who had everything under control. And how often had Lily witnessed those performances, perhaps sensing the disconnect between public confidence and private uncertainty? Victoria's phone vibrated again, a text from Richard marked urgent, with 3 exclamation points. She glanced at the screen. "Board meeting moved to emergency session. Need you on video in 20 minutes. Company future at stake." "Trouble?" Eli asked, noticing her expression. "Work," Victoria said, the word carrying more exhaustion than she'd intended. "Always work. Must be important work to follow you on vacation." Victoria almost laughed at his assumption that she could simply ignore it. "I own a technology company. There's no such thing as time off." "Ah," Eli's tone was carefully neutral. "And what does this company create?" "Productivity software. Applications that help people manage their time more efficiently, communicate faster, work from anywhere." As she said it, Victoria realized how hollow it sounded. "We help businesses run more smoothly." "And does it work, this efficiency?" The question was so earnest, so free of judgment, that Victoria found herself considering it seriously. "Yes, I suppose it does. We've revolutionized how companies handle remote work, how teams collaborate across time zones. But it doesn't make people happier." Victoria looked at her daughter, who was now attempting to braid Thunder's forelock with intense concentration. "I don't know. I don't think I've ever asked that question." Eli nodded as if this admission made perfect sense. "Sarah, my late wife, she used to say that just because you can do something faster doesn't mean you should. Some things need time to grow properly." Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from her lawyer, never a good sign. Victoria felt the familiar spike of adrenaline that accompanied crisis management, the addiction to being indispensable that had driven her for 15 years. "I should take this," she said apologetically. "Of course, Lily and I will visit with Thunder for a while." The assumption that her daughter would be safe with this relative stranger should have alarmed Victoria. Instead, she felt an unexpected relief as she walked back toward the cottage, phone pressed to her ear. "Victoria, we have a problem. The German consortium is claiming breach of preliminary agreement. They say your absence from yesterday's meetings constitutes abandonment of negotiations. Victoria listened to the legal complications with half her attention. The other half focused on the sound of Lily's laughter drifting from the fence line. When had she last heard her daughter laugh? "Stall them," she said finally. "Tell them I'm conducting due diligence on international partnership protocols. Buy me 48 hours. Victoria, you can't manage a $2 billion acquisition from a farm in Pennsylvania. Watch me." She ended the call and immediately powered down the phone completely, something she hadn't done in years. The silence felt both liberating and terrifying. When she returned to the fence, she found Lily sitting on Thunder's back, while Eli held the lead rope, walking in slow circles around the yard. Her daughter's face was radiant with joy, and she was speaking, actually speaking in full sentences about the view from horseback. "Higher than trees," Lily was saying. "See far away, see everything." "The perspective changes when you're elevated," Eli agreed. "Sometimes we need to rise above our circumstances to see clearly." Victoria wondered if he was speaking only to Lily, or if the wisdom was meant for her as well. From Lily's elevated position, the world probably looked less threatening, more manageable. Perhaps that was what her daughter had been searching for all along, not silence but a different vantage point. "How long can she stay up there?" Victoria asked. "As long as she needs," Eli replied. "Thunder doesn't mind, and healing doesn't follow a schedule." As afternoon shadows began to lengthen, Victoria realized she'd gone nearly 4 hours without checking email, returning calls, or managing any aspect of her company. The world hadn't ended. Her employees were handling things. Her clients were being served, and somehow business was continuing without her constant oversight. But her daughter was speaking to a horse about clouds and birds and the way the wind felt at elevation, and that seemed infinitely more important than any emergency, meeting or urgent deadline. When Eli finally helped Lily down from Thunder's back, the little girl ran to Victoria with sparkling eyes. "Mama, I rode the horse high up." "I saw, sweetheart. You were very brave." "Tomorrow?" Lily asked, looking between Victoria and Eli with hopeful expectation. Victoria met Eli's patient gaze and made a decision that would have seemed impossible 24 hours earlier. "Yes, sweetheart, tomorrow." The wooden recipe box had survived 3 generations of Fisher women, its corners worn smooth by countless hands searching for the perfect remedy. Sarah had inherited it from her mother, who'd received it from her, a grandmother, each woman adding her own carefully written cards to the collection. Remedies for colic and sleeplessness, teas for anxiety and heartbreak, poultices for wounds that wouldn't heal. Eli held one of Sarah's cards now, written in her careful script: "For troubled children, chamomile tea with honey, gentle music and patient listening." Sometimes healing begins with someone simply being present. He'd found it while searching for his recipe for liniment. Thunder had been favoring his left foreleg slightly, but Sarah's words seemed meant for this moment, for the conversation he needed to have with the English woman who'd appeared in his life like an answer to a prayer he hadn't known he was praying. Victoria stood at his kitchen door, looking simultaneously determined and terrified. She'd asked if they could talk privately while Lily played with the barn cats, and Eli had invited her in despite the breach of protocol. Unmarried Amish men didn't typically entertain English women in their homes, but these weren't typical circumstances. "I want to hire you," she said without preamble, then immediately winced at her own directness. "I mean, I'd like to pay you for helping Lily." "Whatever. Your rate is for therapy sessions. I'll double it." Eli set down the recipe card and studied her face. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she'd spent another sleepless night fielding business calls. Her clothes were expensive, but wrinkled, as if she'd dressed hastily. "You want to turn Lily's healing into a transaction," he said gently. "I want to ensure she gets the help she needs, consistently, professionally." "And what do you think she needs?" Victoria's composure faltered slightly. "I don't know. That's the problem. I've spent 7 years and more money than I care to admit, trying to figure out what she needs, and nothing has worked until yesterday. Eli poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot that stayed warm on his wood stove, adding cream to both without asking how she preferred it. The simple domestic gesture seemed to calm something in Victoria's tightly wound energy. "Tell me about her." "Silence," he said. "She's been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, with selective mutism. She communicates through behavior, sometimes signs, occasionally a word or two. But nothing like what happened yesterday." Victoria wrapped her hands around the coffee cup as if drawing warmth from it. "The specialists say it's neurological, that her brain processes language differently." "And what do you say?" The question caught Victoria off guard. "I'm not a medical professional, but you're her mother." Victoria stared into her coffee, silent for a long moment. "I think she's been trying to tell me something for years, and I haven't been listening properly." "What might she be trying to say? That the world I've built for her is too loud, too fast, too complicated." The admission came out like a confession, that all my efforts to fix her might be missing the point entirely. Eli nodded slowly. "And if you could hear what she's really saying, what would you do differently?" "I don't know. That's why I'm here, asking for your help." "I'm not a healer," Eli said. "I'm just a man who works with horses. But horses helped her. Horses helped her help herself. There's a difference." Victoria leaned forward, her business instincts engaged, despite the unfamiliar territory. "Then teach me. Teach me how to help her help herself. That would require you to stay, to learn, not just to observe and pay someone else to do the work." "For how long?" "As long as it takes." Victoria's phone had been buzzing intermittently throughout their conversation, but she'd ignored it completely. A small miracle that Eli recognized, even if she didn't. "I have responsibilities, a company that depends on me, and a daughter who needs you. I've been providing for her. Money isn't presents." The words hung between them, not cruel, but undeniably true. Victoria set down her coffee cup with hands that trembled slightly. "I don't know how to be present. I've been moving at full speed for so long that I've forgotten how to slow down." "Then that's the first thing you'll need to learn." Outside, they could hear Lily's delighted laughter as she chased a particularly patient tabby cat around the yard. The sound was so rare, so precious, that both adults paused to listen. "What would it involve?" Victoria asked. "This learning process, farm, work, horse care, understanding the rhythm of days that aren't measured in meetings and deadlines." Eli retrieved Sarah's recipe card and handed it to Victoria. "My wife wrote this years ago. I think she would have liked Lily." Victoria read the faded ink. "For troubled children. Chamomile tea with honey, gentle music and patient listening. Sometimes healing begins with someone simply being present." She sounds wise. She was. Sarah always said that the best healing happens when we stop trying to fix and start trying to understand. And you think Lily needs understanding, not fixing. I think Lily needs someone to enter her world instead of constantly trying to pull her into ours. Victoria folded the recipe card carefully, as if it contained something precious. "If I agreed to this, to learning instead of hiring, what would you expect from me?" "Honesty, patience with yourself as much as with Lily, and a willingness to consider that success might look different than you've imagined. I've built my entire life around a particular definition of success. And how's that working for your happiness?" The question was so direct, so devoid of professional courtesy, that Victoria found herself answering truthfully. "It's not. I thought success would make me feel secure, but I feel more anxious than ever. I thought providing for Lily would be enough, but she needs more than I know how to give. Then perhaps it's time to learn something new." Victoria looked out the kitchen window to where Lily was now sitting cross-legged in the grass, the tabby, cat purring in her lap. Her daughter's face was peaceful in a way Victoria rarely saw at home. "If I say yes, I can't just drop everything. I have obligations, contracts, people depending on me. I'm not asking you to abandon your responsibilities. I'm asking you to expand your definition of what responsibility means." And if this doesn't work, if Lily regresses when we go back to our real life, then you'll know something about healing that you didn't know before. Victoria's phone buzzed again. A text from Marcus that probably contained another crisis requiring her immediate attention. For the first time in years, she didn't reach for it immediately. "How do we start?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning, 5:30, we'll begin with the horses." Victoria nearly choked on her coffee. 5:30 in the morning. Horses don't sleep. Neither do farmers. And healing begins when you're ready to meet life on its own terms instead of yours. As she walked back to the cottage with Lily skipping beside her, chattering about cats and horses and the kind man who made good coffee, Victoria realized she'd just agreed to something that terrified her more than any business negotiation. She was going to learn how to be still. The farrier tools lay arranged on the wooden workbench like instruments of an ancient art. Hammer and anvil, nippers and rasp, each piece worn smooth by generations of fishermen who'd learned that healing. Hooves was as much about patience as precision. Eli's grandfather had passed them to his father, who'd passed them to Eli, along with the understanding that some skills couldn't be rushed or modernized. Victoria stood in the doorway of the workshop at precisely 5:30, coffee in hand and determination on her face. She'd managed 3 hours of sleep between emergency calls and had already fielded 17 messages from her increasingly frantic staff. But she was here, dressed in borrowed jeans and work boots that were 2 sizes too large. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Eli admitted, lighting the forge that would heat the metal for reshaping horseshoes. "I keep my commitments," Victoria replied, though her eyes were already darting toward her phone as it buzzed with another incoming call. "Even the ones that scare you?" She let the call go to voicemail. "Especially those." Lily emerged from the barn carrying a basket of eggs with the careful concentration of someone entrusted with precious cargo. She'd woken at dawn without prompting, eager to help with what she'd already learned to call horse chores. Her hair was braided simply, Victoria's first successful attempt at something that didn't require professional styling. 12 eggs, Mr. Eli," Lily announced proudly. "The brown chicken gave 2. Henrietta's always been generous," Eli said, accepting the basket with appropriate ceremony. "And what did you tell her when you took them?" "Thank you for sharing," Lily recited dutifully, then added with genuine enthusiasm, "She's very soft. Softer than I thought chickens would be." Victoria watched this exchange with wonder. Lily's vocabulary had expanded exponentially in just 4 days. More importantly, she was initiating conversations, making observations, expressing preferences. Dr. Morrison would want detailed documentation, but Victoria was learning to simply appreciate the miracle without dissecting it. "Today we'll start with Buttercup," Eli said, leading them toward the paddock where the gentle mare waited. "She's due for new shoes, and her feet will teach you about patience." Victoria had expected something more dramatic. Therapeutic riding, sessions, structured activities with measurable outcomes. Instead, Eli handed her a curry comb and demonstrated the rhythmic circular motions that would remove dirt and loose hair from Buttercup's coat. "This seems like grooming, not therapy," Victoria observed. "What's the difference?" Eli asked mildly. "Therapy has goals, objectives, measurable progress, and this doesn't." Victoria paused in her brushing, considering. Buttercup's breathing had deepened under the gentle attention, and the mare's eyes had half closed with contentment. Lily was working on the other side with a softer brush, humming quietly while she smoothed the horse's neck. "I suppose the goal is making her comfortable," Victoria said finally. "And how do you measure that?" Victoria looked at Buttercup's relaxed posture, the way she leaned slightly into the brushing, the soft sounds of contentment rumbling in her chest. "By how she responds, by whether she trusts us." "Exactly." Eli moved to Buttercup's hindquarters, running his hands down her legs with professional assessment. "Trust can't be rushed or bought. It has to be earned through consistent, gentle action." As they worked, Victoria found herself falling, into the rhythm of the grooming. Her phone buzzed repeatedly in her pocket, but she resisted the urge to check it. The repetitive motion was oddly soothing, and Buttercup's calm presence created a bubble of peace that felt increasingly precious. "Mama, look," Lily called softly. She'd discovered a bird's nest tucked into the eaves of the barn, with 3 tiny blue eggs nestled inside, baby birds sleeping. "They're beautiful, sweetheart." Victoria abandoned her grooming to admire Lily's discovery, noting how her daughter's face glowed with genuine wonder. "Will they hatch soon?" Lily asked Eli. "Another week or so. Robin eggs take about 2 weeks to develop. Can we watch for them?" "If you're very quiet and don't disturb the mother, yes." Lily nodded solemnly, already planning her daily vigil. Victoria realized that her daughter was learning to anticipate future events with joy rather than anxiety, a fundamental shift that no amount of expensive therapy had achieved. The morning progressed through a series of simple tasks that felt deceptively profound. Victoria learned to pick Buttercup's hooves, checking for stones or signs of infection. She discovered that horses communicate constantly through body language. The tilt of an ear, the shift of weight, the way they turn toward or away from human touch. "She's telling you she's comfortable," Eli explained, when Buttercup rested her chin on Victoria's shoulder while Victoria cleaned her front hoof. "That's her way of saying thank you." "How do you know all this?" 40 years of listening. Horses are honest communicators. They don't pretend to feel differently than they do. Victoria's phone rang, breaking the peaceful concentration. The caller ID showed Richard's number, and she knew from experience that he wouldn't stop calling until she answered. "I need to take this," she said apologetically. "Of course. Lily and I will start preparing Buttercup for her new shoes." Victoria stepped away from the barn, but not far enough to escape the sound of her daughter's delighted laughter as Eli demonstrated how to hold the horse's hoof steady. "Victoria, thank God. The Yamamoto presentation is in 3 hours and they're asking specific questions about the European integration timeline. I need you on video conference immediately. Send me the materials. I'll review them and call you back in an hour. You need to be here. This is a $100 million contract." Victoria watched Lily help Eli position the new horseshoe against Buttercup's hoof, her small hands learning to feel for the proper fit. "Some things are worth more than money, Richard." "Since when?" "You've never said that before." "Since I watched my daughter trust a horse enough to speak," Victoria thought. "Since I learned that healing doesn't follow quarterly projections. Since I realized that success without presence is just expensive loneliness," she said aloud. The silence on Richard's end was so complete that Victoria wondered if the call had dropped. When he finally spoke, his voice carried genuine concern. "Are you having some kind of breakdown? Because if you are, we can arrange for the best." "I'm having a breakthrough, Richard. There's a difference." She ended the call and immediately powered off the phone, a gesture that was becoming easier each day. When she returned to the barn, she found Lily carefully hammering a nail under Eli's patient guidance, her small face scrunched with concentration. "I'm helping make Buttercup's new shoe," Lily announced without looking up from her work. "I can see that. You're doing a wonderful job. Mr. Eli says the hammer knows where to go if you listen to it." Victoria looked at Eli, who was watching Lily's progress with the satisfied expression of a master craftsman training an apprentice. "Is that true?" "Most tools want to do their job properly," Eli replied. "It's just a matter of getting our own expectations out of the way and letting them work." Another lesson wrapped in simplicity, Victoria realized. Like most of Eli's teachings, it applied to more than horseshoeing. She thought of her company, her staff, her constant need to micromanage every decision. What might happen if she trusted her employees the way Eli trusted his tools? As the morning sun climbed higher, Victoria found herself completely absorbed in the ancient craft of farriery. Her hands grew dirty, her back ached from bending over horse hooves, and her expensive manicure was officially ruined. But when Buttercup took her first tentative steps in her new shoes, testing the fit and finding it good, Victoria felt a satisfaction that no business deal had ever provided. "She likes them," Lily observed, watching Buttercup's confident stride around the paddock. "How can you tell?" Victoria asked. Victoria. "She's walking happy," Lily said simply, and Victoria realized that her daughter was right. There was indeed such a thing as walking happy, and she was beginning to remember how it felt. Lily's drawing covered most of the kitchen table, a sprawling landscape rendered in colored pencils with the intense focus she brought to everything that captured her imagination. The farmhouse sat in the center, smoke curling from its chimney in careful spirals. Buttercup grazed in the foreground, her brown coat dotted with meticulous attention to the dappling Victoria had learned to recognize. And there, standing beside the horse, were three figures: a tall man in a straw hat, a woman with dark hair, and a small girl with her hand reaching toward the mare's nose. "It's us," Lily had announced with satisfaction when she'd finished. "Our family at the farm." The word family had stopped Victoria cold. Not people we met or friends who help us, but family, as if Eli had naturally joined their constellation of belonging without any formal invitation or discussion. Now, a week later, Victoria studied the drawing while nursing her morning coffee. Her phone lay dead on the counter. She'd stopped charging it 3 days ago after realizing that most of her emergencies resolved themselves without her intervention. The silence felt less terrifying and more like freedom. "She's very talented," Eli said, following her gaze to the artwork. He'd stopped by to deliver fresh milk, a daily ritual that had evolved into extended conversations about everything from horse behavior to the challenges of single parenthood. "I never knew she could draw like this. At home, she mostly just arranges things, blocks, toys, anything that can be organized into patterns. Perhaps she needed something worth drawing," Eli suggested gently. The observation stung with accuracy. Their Manhattan apartment was filled with expensive toys and educational materials, but nothing that inspired this kind of joyful creativity. Victoria realized that Lily's drawing showed not just the farm, but a vision of belonging that her daughter had never expressed before. "Eli, I need to ask you something difficult," Victoria said, setting down her coffee cup. "Yesterday, my business partner called with an ultimatum. Return immediately or face a hostile takeover. They're questioning my fitness to lead the company." Eli's expression remained carefully neutral. "And what do you want to do?" "That's the problem. For the first time in my adult life, I don't know." Victoria gestured toward the drawing. "Look at her. She's thriving here in ways I never imagined possible. But I have responsibilities. To whom? My employees, my shareholders, the clients, who depend on our software. And to Lily. Of course, to Lily. Everything I've built is for her future security." Eli poured himself coffee without asking, a familiarity that had developed naturally over their morning conversations. "May I tell you about my marriage to Sarah?" Victoria nodded, surprised by the shift in topic. "I was 26 when we wed, full of plans for expanding the farm, buying more land, becoming the most successful farmer in the county. Sarah supported my ambitions, but she had different priorities. She wanted children, a garden, time to quilt with the church ladies." Eli's voice grew soft with memory. "I spent the first 10 years of our marriage working dawn to dusk, building what I thought was our future. What happened? Sarah couldn't have children. We tried for years, saw doctors, prayed constantly, and slowly I realized that all my plans for expansion meant nothing if I didn't have time to simply be with the woman I loved." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "So you gave up your ambitions?" "I changed my definition of success. Instead of the biggest farm, I focused on being the best husband. Instead of the most acres, I treasured the moments we had together." Eli's smile was tinged with both sadness and gratitude. "Sarah lived 17 more years after we stopped trying to have children. 17 years of morning conversations, evening walks, quiet contentment. I wouldn't trade those years for all the success in Pennsylvania. But you must have wondered, what if every day, until Sarah got sick and I realized that wondering about unlived lives was stealing joy from the life I actually had." Victoria looked again at Lily's drawing, seeing it with new clarity. Her daughter had drawn not just a farm, but a vision of wholeness, a place where all three of them belonged together, where love was measured not in quarterly earnings, but in daily presence. "The specialists want to study her progress here," Victoria said. "Dr. Morrison is driving down next week to observe her interactions with the horses. She wants to document everything for a potential research paper." Eli's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly and turned Lily into a case study. "She says it could help other children. Has anyone asked Lily what she wants?" The question hit Victoria like a physical blow. In 7 years of managing her daughter's care, she'd made countless decisions about treatments, therapies, educational approaches, but she'd never once asked Lily what she preferred. She's only 7, old enough to know what makes her feel safe, old enough to understand when adults are treating her like a person versus a project. Victoria thought of Dr. Morrison's enthusiasm about breakthrough data and replicable interventions. Then she thought of Lily's glowing face as she helped groom Buttercup, the natural way she'd learned to read the horse's moods, the confidence that had bloomed in her voice and posture. "You think I should refuse the observation. I think you should ask Lily." That afternoon, while Lily helped gather eggs from the hen house, Victoria broached the subject carefully. "Sweetheart, there's a doctor who wants to come watch you play with the horses. She thinks other children might benefit from seeing how happy you are here." Lily's face immediately clouded with the wariness Victoria remembered from their early in-therapy sessions. "Will she make me answer questions?" "She might ask some questions, yes. Will she write things down about me?" Victoria hesitated. "Yes, probably." Lily was quiet for a long moment, holding a warm brown egg with both hands. "I don't want to be studied like a bug. I just want to be with the horses." The simple clarity of her daughter's preference cut through all of Victoria's professional obligations. Dr. Morrison would be disappointed, perhaps even angry about the wasted trip. But Lily had spoken her truth with the same directness that Victoria was learning to value in Eli's counsel. "Then we'll tell her not to come," Victoria said. "Really?" Lily's face brightened immediately. "Really? This is your healing, not anyone else's research project." That evening, as Victoria composed the email declining Dr. Morrison's visit, she realized she was making choices based on values she'd forgotten she possessed. Her phone remained dark and silent on the counter, but for the first time in weeks, she felt completely present in her own life. Outside, Eli was teaching Lily to lead Buttercup with a halter, the two of them moving in slow circles around the paddock. Watching them, Victoria understood that her daughter had found not just healing, but home, and perhaps it was time to admit that she had too. The drawing on the kitchen table seemed to shimmer in the evening light, a child's vision of family that was becoming more real with each passing day. The medical records had been buried in Victoria's home office for 3 years, filed under Lily Early Intervention in a cabinet she rarely opened. She'd flown back to Manhattan for what she'd told herself would be a quick resolution of the business crisis. Sign the necessary papers, stabilize the company, and return to Pennsylvania within 48 hours. Instead, she found herself at 3 a.m., surrounded by documents she'd forgotten existed, reading reports that changed everything she thought she understood about her daughter's condition. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the genetic specialist they'd consulted when Lily was 4, had identified markers for a rare condition called FOXP2-related speech and language disorder. Victoria remembered the appointment vaguely. It had fallen during the worst of her divorce proceedings, when every day brought new crises requiring her attention. She'd filed the reports meaning to follow up, but other priorities had intervened. Now, reading Dr. Vasquez's notes with the clarity that comes from sleepless desperation, Victoria realized she'd missed something crucial. The condition wasn't simply autism. It was a genetic variation that affected language processing and social communication. More importantly, recent research had identified potential treatments. Her laptop glowed with research papers downloaded from medical journals, each one offering a piece of hope she'd thought was impossible. Experimental gene therapy trials showing promising results. Children with similar conditions achieving dramatic improvements in communication and social interaction. One study described a 7-year-old girl whose progress after treatment was described as miraculous. Victoria's hands shook as she scrolled through the treatment protocols. The therapy was available at only 3 centers in the world, one in Switzerland, one in California, and one in Boston. The cost was staggering, but she could afford it. The risks were real but manageable. The potential benefits were everything she'd dreamed of for Lily. But the treatment had to begin before age 8. Lily would turn 8 in 4 months. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Boardroom in 20 minutes. Yamamoto deal, hanging by thread. Need you here now. She stared at the message, then at the medical research scattered across her desk, then at the framed photo of Lily on Buttercup's back, a picture she'd printed and brought back to remind herself why none of this corporate drama mattered. Except now, it did matter. The money from the Yamamoto deal would fund Lily's treatment. Without touching her trust fund, the company's stability would ensure they could afford the best follow-up care. Everything Victoria had built suddenly had a purpose beyond quarterly profits. The boardroom was exactly as she'd left it 2 weeks earlier. Polished mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, the subtle intimidation of a power dressed in expensive suits. But Victoria felt like a stranger in her own domain, hyper-aware of the recycled air and artificial lighting after weeks of morning mist and autumn sunshine. Victoria, thank God. Richard rose from his chair, relief evident in his voice. The Germans walked away yesterday, but the Japanese are still interested if we can guarantee the timeline. Victoria barely heard him. Her mind was calculating treatment, schedules, weighing the research data against Lily's current progress. The child who'd finally learned to speak clearly, who'd found joy in simple farm life, who'd drawn their little family with such hope. That child deserved every possible chance at a normal life. What do they need to move forward? Victoria asked, settling into her familiar role despite feeling completely displaced. The next 4 hours blurred together in a familiar dance of negotiation and compromise. Victoria found herself agreeing to terms she'd normally question, accepting timelines that seemed impossibly aggressive, promising personal oversight of implementation details. Anything to close the deal, secure the funding, and return to Pennsylvania with hope instead of heartbreak. But when the contracts were finally signed and the Japanese executives had departed with satisfied smiles, Victoria felt none of the victory she'd expected. Instead, she felt the weight of a choice she hadn't yet made, between accepting Lily as she was and pursuing the possibility of who she might become. Her phone rang. Eli's number, which surprised her. He rarely called, preferring face-to-face conversation to electronic communication. Victoria. His voice carried concern that made her chest tighten. Lily's missing. The world stopped. What do you mean missing? She was helping me in the barn around noon. I went to check on the new foal, and when I came back she was gone. I've searched the property, asked the neighbors. She's been gone for 3 hours. Victoria was already reaching for her coat. I'm coming. Call the police. Already done. They're organizing a search party. The drive from Manhattan to Lancaster County had never felt longer. Victoria's hands gripped the steering wheel as scenarios played through her mind. Lily lost in the woods, hurt and unable to call for help, reverting to complete silence under stress. She'd left her daughter for the first time since they'd arrived in Pennsylvania, broken the routine that had brought such healing, prioritized business over presence despite everything she'd learned. She found Eli at the search command post the local fire department had established in his front yard. His face was haggard with worry, his usual calm composure cracked with guilt. Any word? Victoria asked, though his expression already provided the answer. They've expanded the search to include the creek and the abandoned barn on the Stoltzfus property. The state police are bringing in dogs. Victoria felt her world tilting. This was her fault. Leaving Lily when their routine was still fragile, pursuing business deals while her daughter needed stability. All the research about genetic treatments felt meaningless if Lily was lost in the Pennsylvania wilderness. "There's something else," Eli said quietly. "When I realized she was missing, I found something in the barn." He led her to Buttercup's stall, where a small pile of items lay arranged on a bale of hay. Lily's favorite book about farm animals, a handful of the smooth stones she'd collected from the creek, and a drawing, not the joyful family portrait from the kitchen table, but a sketch of Victoria walking away, while Lily and Eli stood alone by the barn. "She knew I was leaving again," Victoria whispered, understanding flooding through her. "She drew this before I left for New York. Children see more than we think," Eli said gently. "Lily's learned to read emotions the way horses do, through behavior, not words. She thought I was abandoning her. Abandoning both of you." Before Eli could respond, shouts erupted from the search team near the creek. Victoria's heart stopped as she imagined the worst, but the voices carried excitement, not tragedy. "We found her!" The fire chief's radio crackled with updates. "She's safe. Repeat, the child is safe." They found Lily in the abandoned Stoltzfus barn, curled up in a pile of old hay, with 3 barn cats for warmth. She was conscious and unharmed, but had retreated into complete silence. The first time since arriving in Pennsylvania that she hadn't responded to her name. "Hey, sweetheart," Victoria said softly, kneeling beside her daughter. "I'm here. I'm sorry I left." Lily looked at her with eyes that held accusation and hurt. When Victoria reached out, Lily turned away, a rejection that cut deeper than any business failure. "She's been here all afternoon," the paramedic reported. "Probably heard us calling but chose not to respond." Classic stress reaction. As they drove home through the gathering dusk, Lily sat silent in the back seat, clutching her book and avoiding eye contact. Victoria realized that her daughter's disappearance hadn't been random wandering. It had been a message, delivered in the only way a 7-year-old knew how. The medical research sat in Victoria's purse, offering hope for a future where Lily might speak fluently, interact normally, live without the challenges of her condition. But watching her daughter's closed-off posture in the rearview mirror, Victoria wondered if pursuing that future meant sacrificing the present they'd found together. The choice between fixing and accepting had become impossible, because now she knew that both options were real. Both had costs and both required a leap of faith that could transform or destroy everything they'd built. The treatment deadline ticked in her mind like a countdown timer, while Lily's silence stretched between them like a bridge burned by good intentions and complicated love. The unfinished wedding quilt lay spread across Sarah's old sewing table like a map of interrupted dreams. Eli ran his fingers along the intricate pattern of interlocking rings, each stitch a testament to his late wife's patient artistry. For 3 years, he'd been unable to touch it, unable to continue what she'd started. But now, with autumn light streaming through the window and the sound of Victoria's gentle voice drifting from the kitchen where she was coaxing Lily to eat breakfast, something had shifted. He could finish it now. Not as a monument to what was lost, but as a bridge to what might still be found. 2 weeks had passed since Lily's disappearance and Victoria's discovery of the medical research. The silence between mother and daughter had gradually thawed, replaced by a more careful tenderness that acknowledged trust once broken must be rebuilt slowly. Victoria had made the difficult decision to suspend her search for experimental treatments, for now, choosing instead to focus on healing the fear her temporary abandonment had created. "She's speaking again," Victoria had told him yesterday, relief evident in her voice. "Not as freely as before, but she's trying. She asked for strawberry pancakes this morning." "Time heals most wounds," Eli had replied, "even the ones we inflict on ourselves." Now, as he threaded the needle with careful precision, Eli allowed himself to imagine a future he'd thought was impossible. The quilt's pattern would be beautiful when completed, Sarah's vision finally realized, but enhanced with colors and stitches that honored both the past and the present. Outside, Victoria was learning to harness thunder for a wagon ride, part of her continued education in farm life, but also preparation for something more significant. The Lancaster County Fair was 3 weeks away, and Lily had expressed a shy interest in participating in the children's equestrian demonstration. Not a competition exactly, but a chance for young riders to show their skills in a supportive environment. "She's never performed in public," Victoria had worried when Eli first suggested it. "What if she becomes overwhelmed? What if she regresses?" "What if she doesn't?" Eli had countered gently. "What if she surprises you?" The question had planted a seed that was growing into something like hope. Victoria was learning to distinguish between protective caution and limiting fear, a lesson that applied to more than just horse shows. The kitchen door opened, and Lily appeared on the porch. With her characteristic morning solemnity, she'd been quieter since her disappearance, more clingy with both Victoria and Eli, but also more intentional in her communications. Every word seemed chosen with care, as if she'd learned that speech was precious and shouldn't be wasted. "Mr. Eli?" she called softly. "Mama says to ask if you want coffee. Tell your mama yes, please, and ask if she remembered to add cream." Lily giggled, a sound that still made Eli's heart lift. "She always forgets the cream. I reminded her 3 times. As Lily skipped back into the house, Eli marveled at the transformation in both mother and daughter. Victoria had officially resigned as CEO of Langford Technologies the previous week, appointing Richard as interim leader, while she explored new opportunities. The business press had been harsh, describing her departure as a breakdown and questioning her fitness for corporate leadership. But Eli saw it differently. He saw a woman discovering that strength could be found in vulnerability, that leadership sometimes meant knowing when to step back, that success could be measured in a child's laughter rather than quarterly profits. The wagon harness lesson was progressing well when Marcus called. Victoria's former assistant had been calling daily with increasingly frantic updates about company crises that somehow seemed to resolve without her intervention. Today's emergency involved a software glitch that had already been fixed by the time Victoria reached her phone. "I don't think you understand," Marcus said after Victoria's calm response to his crisis report. "Without you there, everything is falling apart. Or everything is learning to function independently," Victoria replied, watching Lily help Eli check Thunder's hooves for stones. "Maybe that's healthier than having one indispensable person. But what about your legacy? Everything you built?" Victoria looked at her daughter, who was earnestly explaining to Thunder why his feet needed to be clean for wagon pulling. "I'm building a different kind of legacy now." After ending the call, Victoria found herself staring at the phone with a mixture of relief and trepidation. The medical research still haunted her thoughts. The possibility that Lily could be cured, made normal, given a chance at the kind of life Victoria had always imagined for her. But watching Lily's natural confidence with the horses, her growing vocabulary and social skills developing at their own pace, Victoria wondered if normal was the right goal after all. "Second thoughts?" Eli asked, having observed her contemplation. "Always," Victoria admitted. "There's still time for the treatment. The clinic in Boston could see her next month if I made the call today." "And what does your heart tell you?" "That I'm terrified of making the wrong choice. What if I keep her as she is, and she struggles her whole life? What if I pursue the treatment and it changes everything that makes her uniquely herself?" Eli considered, this while adjusting Thunder's collar. "Sarah and I faced a similar choice once. When we learned she couldn't have children, there were experimental fertility treatments available. Risky, expensive, but promising. What did you decide?" "We spent a year researching, consulting specialists, praying for guidance. And in the end, we realized we were so focused on creating the family, we'd imagined that we were missing the family we actually were. Each other." The treatment might have worked, but it would have consumed years of our marriage with hope and disappointment. Victoria understood the parallel, but also the crucial difference. Lily isn't Sarah. She can't make this choice for herself. No, but she can show you what brings her joy, what makes her feel whole, and you can choose to trust that voice instead of the ones telling you she needs to be fixed. That afternoon, they made a test run to the fairgrounds where the equestrian demonstration would take place. Victoria drove, while Eli and Lily rode in the back of the pickup truck with Buttercup safely secured in the trailer. The mare had made this journey dozens of times, but this would be her first public appearance with Lily. The fairgrounds bustled with early set-up activity, carnival rides being assembled, livestock pens being constructed, vendors arranging their booths. The noise and chaos that would have overwhelmed Lily just months ago seemed manageable now, filtered through her growing confidence and the calming presence of her equine partner. Lots of people, Lily observed, but without her old anxiety. "Will they all watch me ride?" "Some of them might," Eli said honestly. "How does that feel?" Lily considered the question with her characteristic seriousness, scary but excited, like going down a big slide. Victoria felt her chest tighten with protective instinct, but she forced herself to listen rather than intervene. Lily was expressing mixed emotions with remarkable clarity, something that would have been impossible before their time at the farm. They unloaded Buttercup in the practice ring, where several other young riders were working with their horses. Victoria recognized the focused concentration on Lily's face as she helped groom Buttercup and checked her tack. This wasn't just riding. It was partnership, communication, trust made visible. "She's ready," Eli said quietly, watching Lily lead Buttercup around the ring with growing confidence. Not just for the demonstration, but for whatever comes next. What if the treatment could give her even more? What if she could have this confidence plus normal language development, better social skills, and easier life? And what if pursuing that easier life costs her the spirit that makes her extraordinary right now? The question hung between them as they watched Lily mount Buttercup independently for the first time, her small hands sure on the reins, her posture reflecting hours of patient practice. She guided the mare through a simple pattern, her face glowing with accomplishment. "Look, Mama," Lily called, "we're dancing together." And Victoria saw it, the perfect harmony between horse and rider, the communication that transcended words, the pure joy of a child who'd found her place in the world. It was beautiful and complete, and absolutely perfect as it was. As they loaded up to return home, Victoria made a decision that felt both terrifying and absolutely right. She would call Dr. Vasquez's office in the morning, not to schedule treatment, but to decline it. There would be time for re-evaluation later if circumstances changed. But for now, she was choosing to trust in Lily's own healing timeline. That evening, as Eli worked on Sarah's quilt and Victoria helped Lily practice her riding routine, the cottage felt less like a temporary refuge and more like home. The unfinished quilt was slowly taking shape under Eli's patient hands, a symbol of love that could honor the past while embracing the future. "Are you happy here, sweetheart?" Victoria asked as she tucked Lily into bed. "Very happy, Mama." "Are we staying forever?" Victoria kissed her daughter's forehead, breathing in the scent of horses and hay that had become as familiar as perfume. "I think we're home, baby. I think we're finally home." Outside, the Pennsylvania hills rolled away under starlight, holding their small family in a peace that felt both fragile and eternal. Tomorrow would bring the fair, the demonstration, and the choice to trust in love over fear. But tonight, they were exactly where they belonged. The blue ribbon lay in Lily's small palm, like a piece of captured sky, its satin surface catching the afternoon sunlight that filtered through the exhibition tent. She held it carefully, as if it might dissolve if she gripped too tightly, her dark eyes wide with wonder at this tangible proof of her accomplishment. "First place in the youth horsemanship demonstration," the judge had announced, his voice carrying across the crowded fairgrounds. "For exceptional partnership between horse and rider, and for demonstrating that true communication doesn't always require words. Victoria felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched her daughter accept the ribbon with a shy smile that contained more confidence than years of expensive therapy had ever achieved. Beside her, Eli's weathered face glowed with pride, his steady presence an anchor in the chaos of celebration surrounding them. The Lancaster County Fair had drawn its usual crowd of families, tourists, and local farming communities, but Victoria hadn't expected the media attention. Her resignation from Langford Technologies had made business headlines, and somehow word had spread about the former billionaire CEO living quietly on an Amish farm with her autistic daughter. Mrs. Langford, a young reporter with a camera crew, pushed through the crowd, gathered around the riding ring. I'm Jessica Martinez from Channel 8 News. We'd love to ask you a few questions about your transition from corporate life. Victoria's protective instincts flared immediately. She stepped closer to Lily, who was showing her ribbon to Buttercup, with earnest enthusiasm, explaining to the mare that they'd won it together. "This isn't about me," Victoria said firmly. "This is about children learning confidence through horses. I'd prefer you respect our privacy. But surely you understand the public interest in your story. A billionaire giving up everything for life on a farm." The reporter's tone carried the barely concealed mockery that Victoria had learned to recognize in business dealings, the assumption that her choices must represent failure rather than growth. "I didn't give up everything," Victoria replied, her voice carrying new strength. "I found everything that matters." Eli moved closer, his quiet presence lending support without taking over. Victoria noticed how naturally he positioned himself between the cameras and Lily, protecting the child while allowing Victoria to handle the confrontation on her own terms. "So you're saying this lifestyle change is permanent? No plans to return to the corporate world?" Victoria looked at Lily, who was now helping other children admire their horses, her natural empathy drawing shy younger riders into conversation. Her daughter was teaching others the same patience and gentleness that Eli had shown her, creating a circle of healing that extended far beyond their small family. "I'm saying I've learned the difference between success and fulfillment," Victoria said clearly, "between providing for my daughter and being present for her, between fixing what I thought was broken and celebrating what was already perfect." The reporter's camera operator was filming everything, but Victoria found she no longer cared about public perception or professional reputation. Let the business world think she'd lost her mind. Let the shareholders question her judgment. The only opinions that mattered were reflected in Lily's proud smile and Eli's approving nod. "Ms. Langford, there are reports that you've declined experimental treatment for your daughter's autism. Some might see that as denying her opportunities for improvement." The question hit Victoria like a physical blow, threatening to resurrect all her doubts about the choice she'd made. She glanced at Eli, drawing strength from his steady gaze, then looked back at the reporter with fierce protectiveness. "My daughter doesn't need improvement. She needs understanding, patience, and people who see her gifts instead of focusing on her differences. But surely as a mother, I've learned that love isn't about changing someone to fit the world's expectations. It's about creating a world where they can thrive as they are." Lily had noticed the cameras now and was moving closer to Victoria with the cautious awareness that had served her well in overwhelming situations. But instead of hiding, she stood tall beside her mother, clutching her blue ribbon with quiet pride. "Mama, is everything okay?" she asked clearly, her words carrying the confidence that had bloomed over months of patient nurturing. "Everything's perfect, sweetheart. These people wanted to hear about our ribbon." Lily considered this, then turned to the camera with the same serious expression she brought to everything important. "Buttercup and I won because we listened to each other. Mr. Eli taught us that horses understand feelings, not just words." The reporter seemed surprised by Lily's articulate response. "And you like living on the farm?" I love it. Mama is happier here too. She smiles more and doesn't look at her phone during breakfast. Victoria felt her heart swell with a mixture of love and amazement. Lily's simple honesty cut through all the complexity of their situation, reducing it to its essential truth. They were happy, they were together, and they'd found a life that honored all of them. "There you have it, Victoria," said to the reporter, "the most honest assessment you'll get. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a celebration to get back to." As the camera crew moved away to find other stories, Victoria knelt beside Lily and pulled her into a tight hug. The blue ribbon pressed between them, a symbol of achievement that meant more than any business award Victoria had ever received. "I'm so proud of you, baby. You and Buttercup were amazing. Are you proud enough to stay forever?" Lily asked with the directness that Victoria had learned to treasure. "Forever and always," Victoria promised, meaning it completely for the first time in her life. The marriage proposal, quilt square, lay delicately in Eli's weathered hands, its intricate pattern of intertwined hearts speaking a language older than words. He'd worked on it secretly for weeks, stitching by lamplight after Victoria and Lily had gone to sleep, following the traditional Amish custom that asked a woman's hand through the gift of careful craftsmanship. Now, as the fair's evening celebration wound down around them, Eli felt the weight of the moment that would change everything or leave him forever, wondering what might have been. Victoria stood at the edge of the livestock barn, watching Lily say goodnight to Buttercup with the tender ritual they'd developed. A soft song hummed while brushing the mare's neck, a whispered promise to return tomorrow, a gentle kiss on the horse's velvet nose. The sight of her daughter's complete contentment should have been enough, but Eli recognized the shadows in Victoria's eyes, the lingering uncertainty that success couldn't entirely erase. "She's worried about the business buyout offer, Bishop," Samuel had observed earlier, his wise eyes missing nothing during the evening's festivities. Richard Steinberg called during the ribbon ceremony. "I saw her step away to take it." Eli had noticed, too, the tension that had crept back into Victoria's shoulders, the way she'd checked her phone despite weeks of digital silence. The corporate world was calling her back with promises of security and familiar purpose, and part of her was listening. "Mr. Eli?" Lily's voice broke through his contemplation. "Mama says it's time to go home, but I want to show you something first." She led him to a quiet corner of the barn where she'd arranged a collection of items on a hay bale. Her blue ribbon, a handful of smooth creek stones, one of Buttercup's shed horsehair braided into a tiny bracelet, and a new drawing. This one, showing their cottage with smoke rising from the chimney and 3 figures standing together in the yard. "It's our family," Lily said simply. "I drew it for you because you don't have any family pictures on your walls." Eli's throat tightened with emotion. Sarah's photograph still graced his living room, but Lily was right. There were no images of the life they'd built together these past months. No acknowledgement that love could expand to include new hearts, without diminishing what came before. "Thank you," he managed. "It's beautiful." "Are you going to marry Mama?" Lily asked, with the directness that never failed to startle adults. Eli glanced toward Victoria, who was finishing a business call near the barn entrance, her face serious with concentration. "Would that make you happy?" "Very happy. Then we could all live together forever, and Mama wouldn't have to choose between us and her old life." The wisdom in Lily's observation cut straight to the heart of Eli's fears. Victoria was being pulled between worlds, and without a firm anchor in their new life, she might drift back to the familiar chaos of corporate success. When Victoria rejoined them, her expression carried the weight of difficult decisions. "That was Richard. The Japanese consortium is making a final offer for the company. It's substantial." "And?" Eli asked gently. "And it would solve every financial concern I've ever had about Lily's future. College, medical care, security for life." Victoria's voice carried the old tension of someone calculating risks and probabilities. "But accepting means returning to New York for at least 6 months to oversee the transition." Eli felt the moment crystallizing around them, the choice between certainty and faith, between the life Victoria had known and the life they'd discovered together. He reached into his pocket and withdrew the quilt square, its delicate stitching catching the barn's overhead lighting. "Sarah started our wedding quilt the week we got engaged," he said quietly. "It took her 3 months to complete, working every evening by candlelight. She said the pattern interlocking rings represented how 2 separate lives could become something stronger together." Victoria stared at the quilt square, understanding dawning in her eyes. "I've been working on this for weeks," Eli continued. "It's meant to be sewn into the corner of Sarah's quilt, not replacing what came before, but adding to it, making it larger, more complete." "Eli," Victoria's voice was barely a whisper, "I'm asking you to marry me. Not because you need security or because Lily needs a father figure, but because love isn't diminished by being shared. Sarah's quilt can hold all of us, past, present, and future." Lily clapped her hands with delight, the sound echoing through the quiet barn. "Say yes, Mama, say yes!" Victoria took the quilt square with trembling hands, feeling the careful stitches that represented hours of patient hope. Around them, the fair continued its gentle celebration, families heading home with tired children and carnival prizes, young couples sharing cotton candy and dreams, elderly farmers discussing weather and crops with the contentment of lives. "Well lived." "Yes," Victoria said, her voice growing stronger with each repetition. "Yes, yes, yes." As Eli pulled her into his arms, Victoria felt the last of her corporate armor fall away. The business offer could wait. The old definitions of success could be rewritten. She was home, not just in Lancaster County, but in the arms of a man who understood that healing came not from fixing what was broken, but from creating space for love to grow. Lily wrapped her small arms around both of them, completing the circle that her drawing had envisioned months ago. In the distance, Buttercup nickered softly, as if approving of the evening's developments. "When will we have the wedding?" Lily asked practically. "When the harvest is finished," Eli said, looking at Victoria for confirmation. "November, when the fields are ready for rest and the community has time for celebration." "Perfect," Victoria agreed, meaning it more completely than any business decision she'd ever made. The family portrait captured everything Victoria had never known she wanted. 3 generations standing together in the golden light of a Pennsylvania autumn, their faces reflecting the quiet contentment that came from lives lived in harmony with their deepest values. Eli's arm rested gently around Victoria's waist, while Lily stood between them, with one hand on Buttercup's neck, her other hand holding the lead rope of a small pony named Clover. Behind them, the sign for Willow Creek Therapeutic Farm gleamed, with fresh paint, announcing the newest addition to Lancaster County's healing community. "Perfect," said the photographer, a local woman who specialized in capturing families against the backdrop of Pennsylvania's pastoral beauty. "Now one more with just the bride and groom." Victoria smoothed her simple cream-colored dress, not a traditional wedding gown, but something that honored both Amish simplicity and her own evolving sense of style. Eli wore his finest Sunday clothes, his face glowing with the same joy that had illuminated their wedding ceremony 6 months earlier. The wedding had been everything Victoria had never imagined wanting. A simple service in the Fisher's barn, attended by the Amish community that had quietly accepted her as family, and a handful of her former colleagues who'd made the journey from New York. Dr. Morrison had sent a congratulatory card, along with research papers about equine therapy programs, finally understanding that sometimes the best treatment couldn't be quantified or replicated. Bishop Samuel had performed the ceremony with the wisdom that came from presiding over 70 years of marriages, both successful and struggling. His words had been simple but profound. Love is not a feeling to be sustained, but a choice to be renewed daily. In choosing each other, you choose also to serve something larger than yourselves. Now, 1 year after that first morning, when Lily had wandered onto Eli's farm, they were celebrating the official opening of their therapeutic center. The property had expanded to include the neighboring acres Victoria had purchased, creating space for both residential programs and day visits. The old barn had been renovated with modern safety features while maintaining its rustic charm, and a new stable housed 8 gentle horses specifically trained for therapy work. "Mama, can I show Mrs. Patterson how Clover and I practice our routines?" Lily asked, tugging on Victoria's hand. Victoria looked toward the small group of visitors, families with special needs, children who'd driven from Philadelphia and Baltimore to see what the Willow Creek program offered. Among them was 8-year-old Tommy Patterson, who'd been nonverbal since a traumatic accident 2 years earlier. "Of course, sweetheart. Remember what Eli taught you about being a gentle teacher." Lily nodded solemnly and led Clover toward the practice ring where Tommy sat with his parents, his eyes fixed on the ground despite the activity around him. Victoria watched her daughter approach the boy with the same patient kindness Eli had shown her that first morning. No pressure, no expectations, just the quiet offer of connection. "Hi, Tommy," Lily said softly. "This is Clover. She's very gentle and she likes children. Would you like to pet her nose?" Tommy didn't respond verbally, but he looked up, the first eye contact his parents had seen him make with a stranger in months. "She's soft," Lily continued, demonstrating by stroking Clover's neck, "and she understands feelings even when we can't say them out loud." Victoria felt Eli's hand slip into hers as they watched their daughter instinctively replicate the healing approach that had transformed her own life. There was something magical about children teaching children, about healing being passed forward through small hands and patient hearts. "She's remarkable," whispered Tommy's mother, tears streaming down her face as her son tentatively reached toward Clover's nose. "She's learned from the best teacher," Victoria replied, squeezing Eli's hand. The afternoon continued with demonstrations and informal sessions, each family discovering their own version of the magic that had brought the Fishers together. Victoria found herself moving naturally between roles. Sometimes the administrative director discussing program logistics, sometimes the supportive parent sharing her own journey, always the grateful woman who'd learned that success could be measured in moments of connection rather than quarterly profits. As the sun began to set and families reluctantly prepared to leave, Victoria walked through the barn one final time. The completed wedding quilt hung on the wall near the office. Sarah's original pattern enhanced with new squares that told the story of their blended family. Lily's handprint was preserved in one corner, surrounded by tiny stitched horses and hearts. "No regrets?" Eli asked, joining her in front of the quilt. Victoria considered the question seriously. Her former company had thrived under Richard's leadership, proving that her fears about indispensability had been largely ego-driven. The experimental treatment for Lily remained available if circumstances changed, but their daughter continued to flourish at her own pace. Most surprisingly, Victoria had discovered that healing others had become more fulfilling than any corporate achievement. "Only that it took me so long to understand what mattered," she said finally. "We find our path when we're ready to walk it," Eli replied with the wisdom that had first drawn her to him. Outside, Lily was saying goodbye to the visiting families, with promises that they'd see each other again soon. Tommy had managed to brush Clover's neck before leaving, and his parents had scheduled a week-long intensive program for the summer. As the last car disappeared down the gravel drive, the three of them stood together in the gathering dusk, watching their horses graze peacefully in the pasture. Buttercup had become the grand matriarch of their therapy herd, teaching younger horses the patience and gentleness required for healing work. "Are you happy, Mama?" Lily asked, echoing the question Victoria had posed to her that first uncertain week. Victoria looked at her daughter, confident, articulate, radiantly healthy in ways that had nothing to do with medical interventions. Then at her husband, whose quiet strength had taught her that love multiplied rather than divided, and finally at the farm that had become both home and mission. Completely happy, sweetheart. We're exactly where we belong. As they walked toward the house together, Victoria realized that sometimes the greatest success came not from conquering the world, but from creating a small corner of it where healing could flourish, love could grow, and every child could discover their own unique way of walking through life with confidence and joy. The family portrait would capture this moment. But the real testament to their journey lived in the daily choice to choose presence over productivity, understanding over efficiency, and love over all the glittering substitutes the world offered. They were home.